Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, esteemed speakers and the participants and our colleagues from across the world. So today we are here again with another ECD webinar, which is on building brains, the science of early childhood development, every healthcare worker and caregiver should know. So before going into the webinar, I'll just come up with the guidelines for this webinar. That is, if you have questions for the speaker, kindly put them in the Q&A feature. To obtain a certificate of attendance, participants are required to attend the entire duration of the webinar and fill in a feedback form, which will be distributed at the end of the event. Please note that the Zoom closed captions are generated by AI, and there may be instances where the translations are incorrect or misleading. We appreciate your understanding in that. Now it's my pleasure to welcome the moderator of this webinar, Dr. Antonio Rizzoli. He is the head of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics, Hospital Infantil Mexico, Federico Gomez National Institute of Health Professor of Behavioral Pediatrics and Fellowship in the UNAM since 2017. The stage is over to you, Dr. Antonio.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the IPA Child Development group for this invitation for this webinar. I am honored to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Batfa Al-Mamari. She is a Canadian trained consultant general pediatric and developmental pediatric and the head of the first developmental pediatric clinics in Oman at Sultan Qaboos University Hospital in Oman. She is the founding president of the Autism Research Group. Dr. Al-Mamari completed her pediatric residency and developmental pediatric fellowship training at McGill University, Canada. Dr. Al-Mamari is a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada and also had American Board of Pediatric. Dr. Al-Mamari has peer-reviewed research publication and is a recipient of the Best Research Awards as a principal investigation at Sultan Qaboos University twice in 2016 and 2020. Her current research focus is on neurodevelopmental science in Oman, mainly autism spectrum disorder, and she is the co-principal investigator for the research project that received the funding for his Magic T grant entitled Reading Disorders in Omani Children. Dr. Al-Mamari has received awards for recognition for her clinical research and educational work, and she's regularly invited to present at local and international scientific meetings. Dr. Al-Mamari is a peer reviewer for scientific medical journals and served as a chair for the organizing and scientific committee of several conferences. The main one was the first Gulf Autism Conference under the umbrella of Gulf Health Council of the GCC Council, and Dr. Al-Mamari has established the first developmental pediatric specialty in Oman for both undergraduate and postgraduate training, and she's the senior author of the Oman Autism Screening Program as the first model for autism screening in the region. Thank you so much, Dr. Bafta, for Al-Mamari, for being here. We're glad to be able to hear you, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Antonio, and it's actually a pleasure to be part of the IPA family and today to present on a very important topic, the early childhood development, which is the foundation of human potential. And I'm sure we are all agreeing that investing in these critical years is not only a moral imperative, but also one of the smartest strategies for building healthier, more inclusive societies. So to start, this is an overview of my talk today. We'll explore into the science and importance of early childhood development, framed within both global and national context. And if times would allow us, I would highlight more on Oman achievements and program in this field. Starting with some important definitions. Well, the first important one is the child development, which is defined as a dynamic process shaping lifelong potential through mastery in movement, cognition, emotions, and social interactions, each supporting independence, learning, resilience, relationships, and values. Early achievement in these areas forms the foundation for academic success, healthy relationship, emotional strength, and a clear sense of purpose into adulthood. The duration of early childhood is often defined differently by various international organizations, but there is a general consensus on the broad range of years it encompasses. Most international organization agrees that early childhood spans from conception to at least the early years of primary education, typically up to the age of 8, to allow for the smooth transition to early school years. Now, to highlight more on the concept of early childhood development. Well, it is not a single discipline, but a powerful convergence of health, education, nutrition, protection, and social support. It is the science and practice of giving every child the foundation to grow into a healthy and capable and productive adulthood, the pathway through which societies secure their future prosperity. Now, focusing more into the science of ACD, first I would like to highlight very few facts or principles related to ACD. The brain contains approximately 100 billion neurons, each with identical genetic potential, forming the basis for future learning and development. Early brain development is highly responsive to environmental and sensory input, as neural connections are strengthened and organized through stimulation and experience. Nerve signals can travel at a remarkable speed, almost 200 million per second, illustrating the efficiency of early brain functioning. And by the age of 1 year, like most of the scientific research have found that 75% of the brain development would be complete. And by age 3, this figure reached 90%, underscoring the urgency of providing nurturing, enriched environment during this formative window. Um, Now, becoming or focusing more into the basic science concepts, where there are so many research that looked into these facts. However, and these facts have evolved significantly over the years, when incorporating insight from various disciplines like neuroscience, psychology, and biology. Maybe going back in history, early thoughts on brain function and development were, very speculative and often tied to philosophical or spiritual beliefs. For example, the ancient Egyptian and Greek debated whether the heart or the brain was the center of thought and emotion. The ancient Greek physicians proposed that the brain was the center of sensation and intelligence, laying the groundwork for future understanding. Following so many research, mainly the one led by the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child at Harvard University, there were three core concepts that have built actually the science of ACD. And they were selected or chosen, and they have been strongly studied to represent because they represent the strongest cross-disciplinary scientific consensus on how early development unfolds, offering healthcare providers, families, and leaders a clear and actionable roadmap without unnecessary complexity. So now we'll start with the first core concept, which is experiences build brain architecture.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
So please allow me now to highlight some of the main concepts that were reflected in the video that was, showed before. So there are few concepts we should be, aware of when we are considering the science of ACD. First of all, the bottom-up aspect refers to the way in which more basic functions and structures are established first, and more complex functions are built upon them. This means that early brain development lays the groundwork for future learning, behavior, and health. Basic brain architecture is an ongoing constructive process. And as it was illustrated earlier, that there are more than 1 million new neural connections are formed every second in the first few years of life. After this period of rapid proliferation, connection become reduced. Connections are reduced through a process called pruning, so that brain circuits become more efficient. And as illustrated in this diagram, the sensory pathways, which include vision and hearing, are among the earliest systems to develop in the brain. These systems form the basis upon which higher order cognitive processes are built. Again, as you see in this diagram, with the other, like considering the language and the higher cognitive functions, the brain mature in a sequence that starts with the most basic and essential functions. This sensory processing is fundamental for interacting with and understanding the world. So it develops first to facilitate subsequent learning and development. For example, hearing is critical for learning spoken language, and vision is important for reading and recognizing patterns. Now, moving to the second core concept, which is the serve and return interaction that shapes brain circuit. Please join me in this video.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
So now to highlight some of the important concepts that were learned from the second core concept of serve and return interaction. Well, when adults respond to a child sound gestures, or words, it was proven that by neuroscience that would be the foundation of brain architecture and a major ingredient in the developmental process. Consistent, responsive engagement build strong neural connection for learning and emotional health, while the absence of that kind of response would weaken the brain development and widen the lifelong disparities. This makes serve and return one of the most powerful levers for building resilient and capable adults. Another important concept is the brain's capacity for change that decrease with age. Well, the brain is most flexible, or some they call it plastic early in life. The maturing brain become more specialized to assume more complex functions. For example, by the first year, the parts of the brain that differentiate sound are becoming specialized to the language the baby has been exposed to. At the same time, the brain is already starting to lose the ability to recognize different sound found in other languages. This doesn't mean the whole window have closed, but it's always more difficult to alter over time. And in this diagram, you could see the reflection or the explanation of what is known the neuroplasticity, that is the lifelong capacity to learn, adapt to change, and develop psychological resilience. Brain has more plasticity, as we know, in the early years, but the capacity for change decrease with age, and the amount of efforts required to change would be higher as we age, as you can see from this diagram. Now, moving to the third concept, which is the toxic stress drills healthy development.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Now, reflecting more into the main concept learned from the third core concept, well, science have shown that cognitive, emotional, and social skills develop together and reinforce one another. Emotional well-being and secure relationship lay the foundation for attention, memory, learning, while strong cognitive skills support social competence and self-regulation. Strengthening one domain strengthens all others, making integrated approach essential for lifelong success. However, in the presence of a chronic and relenting stress in early childhood that can be caused by extreme poverty, repeated abuse, or severe maternal depression can be toxic to the developing brain. However, we all accept and we know that there are some positive stresses like facing exam, but these are moderate, short-lived physiological responses to an uncomfortable experiences which are sometimes considered as important and necessary aspect of healthy development. What we are highlighting here, as illustrated in this slide is the toxic stress that disrupts the brain architecture. While a healthy neuron forms many connections, persistent stress weakens neuron and reduces connectivity in critical regions like the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. Without supportive relationship to buffer stress, these changes impair learning, memory, and emotional regulation, creating lifelong disparities in health and development. So the question arises, so why early intervention? Why should we care and why should we, try our invest in the early childhood period? To reflect more and or to answer that question, I would like to also present one of the longitudinal, very important study that have really impacted our understanding about the early childhood period, which is the landmark Jamaica study, which investigated how nutritional supplementation and psychological stimulation influence the development of stunted children between 9 and 24 months of age. The study was a carefully structured experimental intervention enrolling 129 children from disadvantaged neighborhoods and randomly assigning them to one of four groups: the control group, nutritional supplementation only; another group with psychosocial stimulation only through weekly play sessions at home; and combined group with supplementation plus stimulation. There was also an included a matched group of non-stunted children. Well, and by having the 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 previously described groups, the design of this research have reflected more, or I was able to isolate the specific and combined effects of nutrition and stimulation, setting a gold standard for evidence on how early intervention can promote child development. And let me provide you with, the follow-up studies and findings and results followed the initial study. So what was initially found, as illustrated in this graph, that while nutrition, as the pink purple line, or stimulation, the green line, alone improved development modestly, the combination of both produced the greatest gains, nearly closing the gap with non-stunted children. The findings provide powerful evidence that integrated early intervention can reverse the disadvantages of stunting and set children on a path toward lifelong success. Furthermore, the long-term outcome of the Jamaica study demonstrated that the benefits of early childhood stimulation extend well into late adolescence. The data drawn from Walker in 2005 show that children who received early psychosocial stimulation intervention continued to display significantly higher cognitive performance at age 17 to 18 years compared to their non-stimulated peers. The bar graph illustrates also gains across multiple domains, including the reading comprehension, sentence completion, vocab, arithmetic, reasoning, and the overall IQ, which is really a very significant finding at that time. A follow-up also study and evaluation, which was, when the candidates were around 22 years of age. The adults who had received, it showed that the adults who have received early stimulation during childhood earned 25% more income than their peers with stunting who received no intervention. The graph illustrates two important comparisons here. In the upper panel, stimulated children outperformed controls in adult earnings, while in the lower panel, stimulated children even surpassed the average income of non-stunted peers. This demonstrates that early stimulation does not only help children catch up, but it can also move them beyond expected outcomes, breaking cycles of disadvantages. Again, the study did not stop at that stage, and there were a follow-up almost conducted nearly 30 years after the original intervention. The study successfully tracked 75% of the original sample, including participants living both in Jamaica and abroad, ensuring robust findings. The results reveal large and statistically significant improvement in adult outcome for those who received early psychosocial stimulation. By age 31, the treatment group earned 43% higher hourly wages and 37% higher overall earnings compared to the control group, alongside notable gains in schooling. Importantly, this represents an even greater effect than the 25% earning increase observed at age 22, confirming that the benefits of early childhood investment not only persist but grow stronger over time. Well, and here you could see that the same study, like the Jamaica study, was replicated in so many societies and different nations worldwide, and all of them have gained the same and achieved the same results as the Jamaica study. Now, to reflect more and based on, the World Bank funded research with the Nobel laureate Dr. Hickman, as you could see here that the study, uh, sorry, that according to Dr. Hickman, that every dollar that is spent on a high quality birth to 5 years program for especially disadvantaged children, it will deliver more than 13% per annum return on investment. And I guess the diagram illustrating it nicely, as you could see that the rate of return of investment in human capital, it actually the more we spend, it reflects that the more we spend in the early years, the higher we would have the returns. And as time pass, if we don't do anything, the return would be less. One might ask, how would we deliver, these different programs? Where can we provide the different, what would be the possible programs that we can ensure that there will be enough support and stimulation for children and include ECD programs? Well, there are many actually opportunities in the health system. Any community health worker visits, mother groups, pediatric wards, outpatient, even the most importantly, the neonatal intensive care unit, child development services, even play corner and health clinic would implementing these programs would definitely have a major impact. Even at education sector, through training, the teachers, the educators, to expose the preschool, sector, the daycare centers with programs that reinforce ECD, definitely the outcome would be great. Now, I'll try to illustrate more on Oman experience and some of the programs that were successfully achieved related to ECD. Well, following the SDGs framework and the 16 goals, we try to implement these roles within Oman Vision 2040, and that was reflected in many goals in our vision, including the education, learning, scientific research, and national capabilities. Also in the health programs, there are many focused programs for the youth and the early childhood periods. This is a reflection on our national screening program, which was established in 2016. We are very proud of this program because it is considered a compulsory routine program for every child born in Oman at the age of 18 months. And it's actually, we have published many data reflecting the importance of we were very happy to announce that we were able to validate and translate the Care for Child Development WHO UNICEF booklets into the Omani culture, and it will be inshallah published soon. Thank you very much. I know I went beyond my time and I apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Batfa, for your amazing presentation. And now I will be honored to introduce Dr. Nirashini Kennedy. She is president of the Pediatrics and Child Health Division of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians and a member of the standing committees of both the International Pediatric Association and the Asia Pacific Pediatric Association. Dr. Kennedy is a developmental pediatrician who works at the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service and the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, Australia. She's a strong advocate for policies and upholds and advances children's rights, addresses the social determinants of health, and prioritizes child health development and well-being. Her clinical work has focused on caring for children involved with the child protection system, as well as improving health outcomes for Indigenous children, with a deep commitment to equity and injustice, and to work bridges between clinical practice and policy to ensure that children have the opportunity to thrive. And also, she is the head of the IPA programs on child development, disabilities, and primary care. And well, I am honored to introduce Dr. Nirashini Kennedy for her lecture.
Thank you very much, Tono, for that generous introduction, and thank you very much for having me. And I just want to acknowledge Dr. Watfa Mamari's really comprehensive presentation, and mine will follow and really focus on messages for parents and caregivers. So just give me a moment to share my screen. Okay. Could I just get someone just to check that that's working? Can see that? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm following Dr. Watfa Al-Mamari, and I'm going to focus my presentation today on what is known as the first 2,000 days, which really takes from conception up till the 5th birthday, and the science of early childhood development, focusing very much on what parents and caregivers need to know. Thank you so much for asking me to participate in this webinar. I'm really excited about being here, and thank you again for asking me. I'd like to begin by just acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from Melbourne in Australia, and where I'm here, I'm on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This photo here of this magnificent mural is of the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service in Melbourne, where I work, and I'd just like to acknowledge that that's where I'm speaking to you from. So across all cultures in the world and around the world, there's a universal understanding of the importance, the potential, and the need to nurture and protect early childhood development. And whether you're a parent, a caregiver, or a grandparent, or whether you work with children, I want to thank you for your interest in this webinar and for being here today. Today, what I want to share with you is some simple but really powerful insights about the science of early childhood development, building on what Dr. Watfa Al-Mamari has shared with you, but especially what we call the first 2,000 days. That's that period from conception to the age of around 5 years of age, and how those years really shape a child's health, learning, and future. So really, we're talking about maternal health and well-being, the antenatal period, and then childhood. And this is an outline of what we'll be talking about. So what do children need to thrive? We know that childhood is an immense time of promise and potential, but the flip side of that is that it's a time of immense vulnerability as well. As a society, we recognize that children should be protected. We know that they, in addition to having their basic needs met of food, water, shelter, that they have a right to a society that protects them, a healthy environment to be cared for and loved, and the right to play and learn and to fulfill their potential. So we can look at that through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or even more broadly looking at Brenner's ecological systems theory, looking at the child in the context of the family in the community, and then the other systems that wrap around a child, which all influence the health of a child as they're developing. But this is not just platitudes. We now have decades of neuroscience and behavioural research, as Dr. Watfa has just outlined, that shows us how child development during the first 2,000 days of life, that's up to the age of 5, lays the foundation for a healthy life and a prosperous and sustainable society. As we've just heard, investment in this period of early childhood is a solid investment for society as a whole. The Heckman curve, which we just saw, it helps us understand that the return of investing earlier in life has a great gain. So childhood's not just important, it's critical in determining the life course of an individual and really the prosperity of society. And the reason for that is that the early childhood is so critical is that because the basic architecture of the brain, as we saw in those videos, is constructed through an ongoing process that begins before birth and continues into adulthood. So I thought I'd give you a very brief overview of some of the science around the factors in maternal health and the antenatal period that actually have a huge impact on the health, well-being and development of a child. So the health and well-being of a mother matters even before conception. That's nutrition, stress levels, mental health, medical conditions can all have an impact on early embryo development. We know from the Barker hypothesis, which Dr. David Barker in the early 80s proposed that many adult chronic diseases begin in the womb. That is, the prenatal environment shapes long-term health risks, particularly in relation to cardiovascular disease. But now what we're realizing that there are several other health conditions that have their origin in early development. And there's a whole body of science around the developmental origins of health and disease, or DOHAD. We also know that during pregnancy, during the antenatal period, exposure to toxins, so smoking or alcohol, but other toxins as well, can have an impact on the developing fetus. And care during that period needs to, consider a mother's nutrition as well as, and also increasingly we're becoming aware that healthy environments and exposure to pollutants and plastics and what are known as endocrine disrupting chemicals are now, we have got some emerging evidence that these too might have an impact on child development and even on conditions such as autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. It's really an area of emerging research. So really, in terms of messages for parents and caregivers, particularly mothers, is that if you're a mother, looking after your own health is really crucial in ensuring that your child has the best start to life. And here are some simple things that you can share with parents and caregivers who you see, or if you're a parent or caregiver yourself, to prioritize your physical health and nutrition. So get a general health checkup, checking your blood pressure, checking on any chronic conditions, ensure your vaccinations are up to date. Check on your nutritional status, take some folic acid supplements, perhaps check iron levels, vitamin D, and so on. The second is to attend all your regular antenatal checkups with your GP or a midwife. And those screenings are designed to monitor the pregnancy and to detect any issues there. The third is to avoid harmful exposures, particularly smoking and alcohol. The fourth is to support your mental health and well-being during pregnancy. Connecting with a GP or a counsellor, checking in with your support network is also really important. And the final thing is to identify, because it takes a village to raise a child and it takes a village to make a healthy mother, is to identify your support systems. So why do the first 2,000 days matter? I won't spend too much time on this slide because we've just covered it in Dr. Watfa's talk, but essentially early experiences affect the development of brain architecture, which provides the foundation for all future learning behavior and health. And in the first few years of life, there are more than 1 million new neural connections that are formed every second. And these are all driven through responsive caregiving and an interaction between the genes, the environment, and a child's experience to shape the developing brain. In the same way, inconsistent or inappropriate interactions from a caregiver can also negatively impact normal brain development. And as we've heard, toxic stress can damage the developing brain architecture, which can lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, and physical and mental health. So science, this was the video I was going to play here is exactly the video that you've just seen. So we will keep moving ahead. So the first 2,000 days are a window of immense opportunity to positively influence a child's health and development. And that's because babies are born with a need for connection. Their brains are built through nurturing, safe and responsive caregiving, and interaction and play are crucial for brain development. Responsive and nurturing boundaries and guidance by parents is really essential. And language exposure, early language exposure primes a child for language and then literacy development. And also healthy habits made in childhood, including sleep, nutrition, physical activity, and limiting screen time are also very important. So this is a slide from the Royal Children's Hospital, which sort of summarizes the first 1,000 days, which is obviously from birth until the age of 2, about the range of things that really a child needs to contribute to raising healthy, resilient children. So opportunities to learn through play, green spaces, nutritious food, safe communities, a toxin-free environment, loving, responsive relationships, secure housing, and obviously focusing very much on that critical development in those early years. So science tells us also about the crucial importance of the early attachment between a baby and their primary caregiver or caregivers in promoting that connection. Obviously, this takes a village, and in many cultures and communities, care is given by a range of caregivers, which has many benefits. And the role of breastfeeding as well goes beyond nutrition in strengthening attachment and bonding. Again, I'm going to skip past this because we've seen this video, but I just want to come back to this idea that babies' brains are built through interaction with their caregivers, through talking and play, and what's known as serve and return. So what that means is that when an infant or a young child babbles, gestures, or cries, and an adult responds with eye contact, words, or a hug, this back and forth interaction, which is known as serve and return, actually helps to build and strengthen the neural connections in the child's brain. And it's these neural connections that are really essential for the development of a child's communication and social skills. And this happens through play. And every culture has games and rituals and songs and rhymes that you can use. And it's really important to know that play doesn't need to involve expensive toys or gadgets or screens. Parents can turn everyday activities into fun learning opportunities. And this is a postcard. You might recognize the person in the postcard. If you don't, it's 10 years old. So, but this is myself and my then 3-year-old daughter, and we were featured in a promotion by our maternal and child health nurses who do provide our universal well child checks in Australia. They do 10 key ages and stages over a child's first few years. And this was about the importance of play, but play through everyday activities. And the title here is We're Making More Than Just Cake. So as you can see there in the picture, my daughter is pretending to make a cake. She's pretending to, have a party with her teddy bears. And through that process of play, you are introducing ideas about healthy food and nutrition, about numbers and measurement and science. and sharing. So there's so much that children can get from a simple play activity. I think that's really important message for parents and caregivers, that very simple interaction is just absolutely crucial. All children have a healthy childhood. Some children are vulnerable through the social determinants of health, and some are exposed to stress and toxic stress as a result of illness, prolonged hospitalizations, or traumatic events. And adverse childhood experiences that occur during childhood, such as war and conflict, abuse, neglect, family violence, or parental mental health, can have a long-lasting effect on a child's development and behavior. And they can do this actually by profoundly altering brain architecture and disrupting neurobiological pathways that affect executive function, emotional regulation, learning well-being, as well as physical health. The original adverse childhood experience study by Filetti and others at the Kaiser Permanente provided some of the strongest evidence for the link between childhood adversity and adult health outcomes. This study looked at 17,000 adults who were asked about their exposures to 10 adverse childhood experiences, which included physical, sexual, emotional abuse, parental mental illness, and family violence. They then correlated the ACEs scores with health outcomes. And what they found was a strong correlation between a person's ACE score and adult health outcomes. For example, that having 4 or more ACEs led to 10 times the rate of heart disease, 5 times the rate of depression, and a 20-year reduced life expectancy. And there's almost a dose-response relationship between adverse childhood experiences and health outcomes, which was not explained by risk behaviours. We've had similar studies in Australia, the Australian Childhood Maltreatment Study, which was published in 2023, which also showed very similar results. And in my work with Aboriginal children, particularly in the statutory out-of-home care system, most of them who have experienced considerable adverse childhood experiences. When we audited our clinic a number of years ago, we found extraordinarily high rates of physical, developmental, and mental health problems. So all of this costs the health system in terms of an excess burden of disease. And this slide draws on some of the evidence from studies looking at the neurobiological pathways from childhood adversity to adult disease. And there is now a growing body of evidence on the epigenetic pathways that lead to these physical changes. So from a public health point of view, there's a powerful argument about investing in prevention so that we can have a maximum improvement in closing the gap in adult health outcomes. So when we look at adverse childhood experiences and childhood development, what are the key messages for parents and caregivers? So while the role of parents and caregivers is so crucial in providing a safe and responsive environment, we need more than that. We need supportive environments through good public policy, addressing the social determinants of health, promoting child rights, access to services that support parents. All of these can help mitigate the negative effects of adverse childhood experiences and support parents to help their children to thrive. And it's also really important and really crucial that we discuss protective factors, resilience, and also the concept of developmental plasticity that Dr. Watfa mentioned. It's really important there's a message of hope here that early intervention and support can change trajectories. So exposure to adverse childhood experiences does not mean that poor outcomes are inevitable, and that's a really important message. So just leading on from that, I want to say something very important. I think as parents, we feel we need to be perfect. But there's no such thing as a perfect parent. And what children really need is good enough parenting. That's parenting that's responsive, that is protective, that is warm, attuned, and consistent. And it's also important that, as many in the cultures around the world recognize, it takes a village to raise a child. Parents need supportive systems around them too to do the most important job in the world. And that means access to paid parental leave, childcare, safe housing, and support for their own health and well-being, as well as safe environments. But what does science tell us about which parenting style is best? There are thousands of books, podcasts, Instagram influencers who all have their opinion on how it's best to parent. What does the science say? Well, there are three main parenting styles. The first is authoritarian, and this is where there are strict rules and high expectations with very little warmth or nurturing. There's an emphasis on obedience and discipline. And then on the other side, there is what we call permissive parenting. And this is lenient parenting with few rules and expectations, sometimes can be called child-led, where there is high warmth and nurturing, but little discipline or guidance. But what the evidence tells us is that it is the authoritative parenting style. So that's authoritative, not authoritarian, which is a balanced approach where there are clear rules and expectations, but also warmth and nurturing. It encourages independence, but also open communication. So it's boundaries that are nurturing and guidance that is loving. And some of the features of that style of parenting is really this warm and responsive style. It's a type of parenting that sees himself as an emotion coach. So building emotional intelligence, helping a child who to understand what might be driving that behavior, teaching co-regulation, teaching empathy, teaching distress tolerance and self-regulation. They're all important things to do. And also it's important parenting is about guiding your children in building healthy habits that last a lifetime. And these habits can also have a positive effect on your child's health, development, and well-being, and also yours as well as a parent. So the first 2,000 days are a uniquely sensitive period that impacts a child's life. Every parent and caregiver wants the best for their child. And childhood is not just important, it's critical in determining the life course of an individual. By what you're doing as parents, you're supporting your child to reach their potential and to build a better future. And it really is clear from the science that parents and caregivers have the greatest influence over a child's life. So I thought I'd finish with 5 messages for parents and caregivers to promote childhood development. The first is talk, read, sing, and play with your child, even from birth. Every interaction helps to build your child's brain. Secondly, respond to their needs with love, consistency, and calm. Think about nurturing boundaries as you guide your child. This helps them self-regulate and to learn emotional intelligence. Thirdly, take care of your own health and well-being. It's so crucial. Fourthly, use the services available to you. It takes a village, and reach out to your health nurses, your doctors, parenting supports, and playgroups. And fifthly, seek help early if you're concerned about your child's development, because early intervention, as Dr. Watpa says, really does work. I've finished with a few references, which I'm happy to share around later, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niroshini, for your great lecture. And we have a couple of minutes. And thank you so much for all the participants across the world that has been watching this webinar. And it's going to be available on the webinar site from the IPA. And we have questions from the audience. First, Ana Paula Castro asked, what kind of interventions are most recommended according to dimensions studied? I think that the studies is about the promotion of child development. I don't know if you, Dr. Nirashini, or you, Dr. Vafta, could answer about the interventions that could be helpful to promote child development. That's the first question.
Thank you, Antonio. I guess the intervention might have or different meanings, but if it's intervention concerning promotion of child development, I guess the simplest way of interacting um, in a very nurturing, way between a child and a caregiver, that would be, in a simplest way, the most, I would say, impactful intervention. The stimulation that I tried to reflect during the presentation through, like, there are so many resources in that regards. An intervention does not require at all any kind of, expensive toys or expensive items that should be provided. We are talking here about the simple reciprocal interaction, simple play and stimulation with a child during the early period, based on the, of course, the developmental age of a child.
Dr. Nirashini, would you like to add something?
I think Dr. Watfa has answered that really comprehensively. I agree with what she said.
Okay. Well, we have another question from Ines Irasema. In your opinion, what are the most cost-effective interventions during the first 2,000 days that should be prioritized in resource-limited settings, particularly in countries like Mexico?
Dr. Antonio, I should preface this answer by saying that perhaps you would possibly have more to share for this, but I can say, I guess from in general terms, in terms of cost-effective interventions, I think investing in maternal health, antenatal care and screening for all the things that we've just discussed. And also, there certainly, while I can't comment on particular countries, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Tono, but certainly things like enhanced nurse visiting has been something that has been really helpful. Obviously, that can be quite a costly intervention, but in many places, I know that is sometimes delivered through trained community health workers. But I'd love to hear what, Tono, if you had anything to share there.
Oh, thank you so much. Maybe I would do that in the closing part, but there are still two questions. Is there a management algorithm for ACEs? And the other question from Karen Macari is, when looking at ECD, we have pediatrician at the peak of the pyramid and caregivers, parents at the bottom of the apex, especially in the marginalized communities or geographical settings. In your expert opinion, how best should we bridge this gap, considering under-resources as key to ensure caregivers have all the support necessary to promote ECD? I don't know if you would like to add an answer to that, to be to the closing part.
I think parents and caregivers are really key. That's one of the messages that certainly I hope to convey through this talk. I think that whenever we're looking at the interventions that are going to be most useful, I always like to look at it from a point of view of primary healthcare. So looking at things that are empowering to communities, that can be community-led, that can build health literacy, and can be delivered through local networks, not relying on specialized health staff. And I think early childhood development is a really good example of that. And certainly there are some lovely examples of that worldwide. During my training, when I completed a Masters of Public Health, I spent some time in Jamkhed in India at what's called the Comprehensive Rural Health Project, where there is a wonderful model of primary healthcare that is delivered in that community based on trained village health workers who actually do what in a country like Australia, a job that is done by nurses in terms of weighing and measuring babies and checking on developmental progress. So there are lots of models like that where things can be delivered, by people other than pediatricians. And I think the lovely thing that I took away from visiting a number of those villages was how being embedded in a community just meant that knowledge spread, and you had people who are empowered, and that has a roll-on effect of benefit to the whole community. So I think we should be certainly looking at methods of delivery that can lead to the community taking this on board, and more empowering.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nurjini, Dr. Bafta. In a closing part and giving the pointers, something that we want to improve as a program area from ECD, disabilities, childhood disabilities, and primary care is empowering primary care providers. And it's something important because we have to strengthen parental confidence. They need to trust in themselves. They need to think that they can do the things. And one amazing tool that we have now is early education. The studies for Professor Heckman was from preschool education, but now we have seen that early education is very important. And in countries like Mexico, early education is a right, but the first providers are us as pediatricians, as neonatologists, or nurses, or primary care physicians, that we need to take that in account. And as they have told, we have not seen just the first 1,000 years, but we have to expand to the 2,000 years to be able to get every child to get the best connection possible. And that doesn't mean that later couldn't do that connections, but it's going to be harder to create that connection instead of early connections. And there is no necessity of expensive toys. The best and the most amazing resource that has a mother or a father is himself or herself and their ability to connect with the child. And thank you so much for this amazing presentations. Thank you so much for your time. And we're a little bit out of time. This recording is going to be available in the IPA webinar area, and we invite you to continue participating in these webinars from ECD and for primary care and disabilities. And thank you so much for your time, and good morning, afternoon, evening across the world.
Thank you, Dr. Antonio, Dr. Nuroshi, and Dr. Vatva for this webinar and amazing presentation, and all the participants for attending the webinar. We request you to fill the feedback form in order to obtain the certificate. The link will be provided when you close the webinar. It is already, you will see the link of the webinar feedback form. So we request you all to fill the feedback form. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you, Tono. Again, thank you very much for that. And Susan and Watfar and Rosie.
Thank you so much, Nuroshi. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for a great presentation.
Really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Bye.
Don't